88 keys, up to 16 axes, RGB lighting and all that for $400 in the dual stick setup? Let's take a closer look. Because in this review we take a detailed look at the new Thrustmaster Sol-R joystick series, in this case in the Sol-R version 2, so as a dual stick setup. And before we start, Thrustmaster has provided us with these sticks for free for our review. But there were no specifications or areas that we were not allowed to talk about. So this is our free and own opinion. In the video we give you answers to all important questions. We will go through the complete unboxing, the setup up to the installation and implementation, for example into the Star Citizen universe. And we have also built one of the sticks apart to get to know the inside better and to be able to access the modification options. And of course, we give you an honest feedback and honest assessment for one the new Thrustmaster Sol-R is worth and for one not. Where the strengths but also the weaknesses are. And what we noticed after a few hours of flying time so far. We start with the unboxing of the dual stick variant, so the Sol-R 2 variant. Whereby version 1 and 2 only differ in how many sticks you get in the end. In addition, we take a look at all the technical data and give you some explanations along the way if you are not a joystick pro. The Sol-R 2 HOSAS box comes with 2 Sol-R bases and 2 Sol-R grips. Whereby these bases here simply differ only by a switch on the back between left and right. The total package has a weight of just under 3.5 kilograms, whereby a base with just under 20 by 20 by 25 cm still needs a lot of space. In addition, we get 2 Sol-R grips in a left and a right version. And these are new and developed especially for space simulations. Incidentally, the grips are completely ambidextrous, so they can be covered into a right and left variant, and that for each stick. In addition, we have different switching pads for right and left hands and some adjustment options, which we will of course also look at in detail. In addition, there are 8 stabilizing feet made of rubber against slipping if you do not want to screw the sticks to a Monster Tech bracket or other options. Also, we find 2 USB-C cables with a length of just under 1.8 meters with the package. The first impression of the optics is quite successful, where we mainly find plastic here and a few metal components. But more on that topic later. Because first we go into detail, namely into the technical details of these new space joysticks. With a price tag of just about $400 for a dual stick setup, the question arises what components are used, what the technology looks like and whether the Sol-R can keep up with high-end or mid-range joysticks at all. Let's start with the heart of a joystick. Here, Thrustmaster uses the so-called H.E.A.R.T sensor technology, and H.E.A.R.T is an abbreviation for Hall Effect Accurate Technology. And yes, Thrustmaster has really made an effort with this acronym. For comparison, other high-end manufacturers also use 16-bit Hall effect sensors. But what distinguishes a Hall effect sensor? In short, like on a smartphone, a sensor measures without mechanical contact how you wipe over the screen. The H.E.A.R.T sensor works similarly. They use magnetic fields to measure the position of the stick. And the result? No wear or tear as with older joysticks, which you may remember from early days. And 60-bit simply means that the stick recognizes over 65,000 different positions. And for comparison, a standard gamepad stick works with around 10-bit and only recognizes 1024 steps. And this precision allows you to perform microscopic small movements, perfect for precise aiming or gently docking to the next space station. Another core element of joysticks are the different axes that we can use. Here, the Sol-R offers 8 axes for each stick, so 16 in total. That means we can control 16 different directions at the same time. However, we only have 10 fingers. But don't worry, the distribution of the axes is logically divided. For joysticks we have an Y and X axis, for example, to move the ship back and forth to the right or the left side, as well as the Z axis for rotations. So yaw movements, which can provide the rotation of the ship, or a vertical axis. In addition, the Sol-R can respond to up to 4 virtual axes, a small thrust controller, a rotary wheel or a mini joystick. And in addition, there are 44 programmable joystick buttons. That doesn't just sound like a lot, but it really is. On the left side of the base we find 2 switch holders with an up and down position and 4 rubberized DJ buttons, so it feels like you're pressing a button on a DJ desk, which are supple and soft. In the left area there is also a rotary wheel, which can be turned up and down infinitely, as well as pressed. And the small thrust controller, which is also animated with an LED, provides the final touch. On the right side of the base we find a 4-position rotary wheel which has fixed positional adjustments. Analogously of the left side, again 4 DJ buttons which are also rubberized and have a pleasant pressure point, and also 2 switches. On the space grip we find a rotary wheel that can be turned and pressed, as well as 2 single buttons and 2 heads which can also be clicked. In the middle we find the analog joystick which can also be pressed. A feature is the dual trigger, that is, a 2-touch trigger, a main trigger, as well as a lever that you can press and pull. The 2 buttons for the little finger are ultimately only 1 button, but can be used on the right or left. And at the end of the grip we find, as mentioned, the option to attach a Z-axis to the bottom of an Allen screw, with which we can prevent rotational movements. And of course, there is the possibility via the T.A.R.G.E.T software and various switches to make additional scripts and macros or any adjustments of the various buttons. Final touch of the main features is ultimately the RGB zone lighting, where we can control 11 different RGB zones and color individual areas differently. But in order to implement motion inputs with the joystick cleanly in the game, there are various gimbal mechanics, where Thrustmaster uses the so-called ball and spring systematics with the Sol-R. Other high-end manufacturers often use here the cam and roller variant. Each technique has its advantages and disadvantages. With the ball and spring system used, you can imagine that a ball is pulled or pressed evenly by springs in all 4 directions. This offers the advantage, especially for space simulations, to generate an even resistance in all directions. Because here we usually control more than just 2 axes at one time. One of the disadvantages, on the other hand, is that we cannot adjust the resistance manually, but more on that later. The movement angle that the joysticks allow is also relevant. For the main axis Y and X we have 18 degrees here, and for the Z axis 20 degrees. For comparison, most cheaper sticks offer only 15 degrees here. Flight simulators have the option of activating a mechanical lock in the Z-axis, ideal if you fly with pedals and do not want to accidentally rotate the stick. A final feature is the modularity of the handles. Here we can convert them to a right and left stick, add different attachments or a thumb rest. So we can change the sticks from a right to a left in the configuration about 1 to 2 minutes. And this is not a matter of course. Even many high-end sticks do not offer this at all, or only with separate accessories and a lot of effort. And for simulation fans? Yes, an assembly for existing sim rigs is of course possible, because in the base plate we find 3 different points of contact, for example for brackets for MonsterTech. And here is the T16000 joystick series compatible. And thanks to the additional stabilizing feet, it is also possible to use it on a table without any problems. But the used construction of the Thrustmaster Sol-R also has a disadvantage, because due to the closed core we have no access to, for example, the springs, so we cannot change them without problems and adjust them as we like. But if you switch from another joystick to the Sol-R, it is our recommendation to spend a few hours with it, because the difference between different gimbal systems, such as a cam and roller system or the ball and spring system used here, is only noticeable over time. Basically, we had the wish to adjust the springs as usual right after unpackaging, but after a few hours this wish has become significantly smaller or no longer exists. But let's move on to the next area, namely the software for the Sol-R series. Here, Thrustmaster uses the well-known T.A.R.G.E.T system. We can find the software directly via the Thrustmaster website and here under the Sol-R. But we have of course also added the whole thing to you in the video description. First of all, we recommend adjusting your firmware. You can see this directly in the overview after plugging in and starting the Thrustmaster TM software, which version is used and which version is available. In our case, the used firmware was of course identical to the firmware that was offered. But we did not want to keep up the firmware update process for you. Also make sure that you have two different devices. Here you need to update the base and the stick. Thrustmaster also offers the ability to use various other handles on your Thrustmaster Sol-R base using an adapter. But we are dependent on the T.A.R.G.E.T software for further settings such as LED lighting and so on. Here we start the configuration mode via Run Configuration and then select of the downloaded file. Here we finally find the joystick control panel. This shows us all connected devices, and if a stick, like in our case, our left stick does not appear directly, just deactivate it by disconnecting and reconnecting again. With this, we can separate, depending on how much Sol-R we connected, the settings for the LED configuration and assigning our keys and so on. And of course, the T.A.R.G.E.T software offers a lot of special features which would go beyond the scope of this review. Here we extend the menu with a double click for our joystick. In addition, at this point we find the option to search for updates for our sticks and get the corresponding message. The second option of updating our stick. And this graphic is not just a picture, but an interactive menu where we can move and press corresponding keys or various axes and get shown which key or which axis is used. In addition, we have the option in the lower left corner to activate virtual axis for the encoder or for the scroll wheel. But since we have more than enough axes, we have omitted this function. If you activate the option, you lose keys, so to speak, but get virtual axis for it. And keep in mind, not all functions can be assigned to axes in games like Star Citizen. So you should pay attention to what you use as an axis or what as a button or key. In the upper right corner we find the settings for the LEDs, where we can assign a color for each single lighting key, for example with our own code. Here we can operate the color settings completely step by step, but it is not possible to assign different colors for different functions. This means that the game cannot give a feedback to our stick whether our landing gear is off or on. Here we can just assign colors for different keys. It is not yet known whether future deeper functions, for example via different LED modes at different stadia, will be implemented. Basically, we have designed two different color schemes for our sticks, for the right and left to simplify the overview and different areas, which we have also assigned as buttons, accordingly also colored. Definitely a plus. Via the T.A.R.G.E.T software, as well as the script editor, we can configure all functions, which enable an adjustment of different keys or a reprogramming. With this, self-made macros and scripts are possible. And if we run the T.A.R.G.E.T software in the background, we can summarize several USB devices, so several Sol-R joysticks, to one device and thus configure only one device. But it is not necessary, and we recommend in this case to set both devices separately from each other. This means directly in the game. Another functionality via the device analyzer is the possibility to display your axes in detail, whereby we can see error messages or problems with individual axes very quickly. And of course, especially in Star Citizen, there are still some settings under the options, whereby we switch to key bindings here, go to joystick and HOTAS in our right area and activate the advanced settings. Here we can either load the also downloadable preset from Thrustmaster or the pre-made one in the game for the Sol-R series. And in addition, we also have provided you with our suggestion and recommendation as a download in our Discord, which you can find under Downloads. To select the corresponding preset, we select our Sol-R, and with keyboard and mouse, and also with the joysticks. Here you are shown all devices recognized as joysticks from the game, in this case our mouse as well. And to check whether the settings and the profile were taken correctly, we switch once under the flight management or flight movement buttons. Here we select, for example, the pitch axis and use our stick, which is intended for this. Then we click on pitch and select the corresponding axis, in this case right and left on our joystick. The correct Y-axis should be displayed. But the input 2 is displayed here, so the two joysticks in Star Citizen have been exchanged directly, which is unfortunately not a single case in this game, but not due to the joystick manufacturer. In this case, only the console helps us to open with the button below the escape button and to enter the following command: pp resort devices joystick and the numbers. With this we can, for example, exchange joystick 1 and 2. The order is correct and our bindings on our pre-made preset works. And of course you can assign each button and each axis individually, although Star Citizen offers countless options here. To test your configuration, it is recommended to switch to the Arena Commander in the offline mode and to use the free flight mode here. So you can not only test your configuration on foot with vehicles but also with spaceships. And here we come to one of the most common problems. For example, and in our case, we activate our left joystick, which serves as a thrust regulator, and give thrust forward. But our ship flies backwards. In order to fly forward while pushing forward, we have to invert the axis. To do this, we switch to the options menu again and go to controls here, and in the lower right corner we select our corresponding joystick, in our case our joystick 2. The inversion settings and flight, we can then invert the corresponding axis with flight movement, here throttle forward and back. If we now go back to the game and push our left stick forward, our ship also moves forward. And don't worry, this problem is common. And with that, we have solved two of the most common problems directly and our joysticks should work as expected. But how can you now use the existing preset, which we have provided you for download, or which you can download directly from Thrustmaster in the game, or then also implement as we have suggested? To do this, you open your game directory, go on the Star Citizen, live version, client, folder 0, control and mappings and simply insert the file here. In the game, you will then find the option to select and you can transfer your preset directly to the game and use different ones. This brings us to the conclusion of the new Thrustmaster Sol-R series. In the dual version, so with 2 sticks, you get 88 programmable keys for just about $400, more than enough for every space sim game out there. Precise 16-bit hard sensors with 65,000 positions, extensive RGB lighting, a modular design with interchangeable grips, a versatile use without additional cost and a solid processing with metal and plastic hybrid materials, where we only find metal inside. Weaknesses are mainly found in the material, as we mentioned, almost exclusively encounter plastic in the outer area, but this feels just right. In addition, we do not have the option to set resistances manually, but are bound here to the specified settings. And the target software can be a strength for beginners but also a weakness for professionals. Here we have limited options, but everything we need to set up our sticks. And how does the Sol-R compare to the established competitors? In terms of processing and technology, the Sol-R does not need to hide from competitors from VKB or Virpil. Here, prices are sometimes tripled for the same thing, although the scope is usually significantly smaller in the base. So, for the Sol-R, we can make an absolute purchase recommendation for the single stick as well for the dual stick variant. There is no more joystick for less money on the market so far. In addition, the technical features as well as the processing are quite comparable to higher priced competitors. But who is the purchase worth? On the one hand, for everyone looking for an upgrade for cheap entry-level sticks or the entry into the world of joysticks, there is currently no better option here. But also advanced space pilots get a performance here or medium or high-class sticks, and that partly for a third of the price. And who are the sticks not suitable for? Absolute enthusiasts who really want to do everything with individual keys or axes, want to perform various special software adjustments, or want to make a strong adjustments in hardware, such as different spring tensions or the removal of complete springs, locking for complete axes and more. The Sol-R series does not offer such things. Finally, the Thrustmaster Sol-R 2 in the HOSAS variant, the Space Sim Duo, is an impressive piece of hardware that closes the gap between budget and high-end joysticks. With around $400, it is an investment can be worth for any space sim pilot who wants to take his gaming experience to a new level with joystick or a dual stick setup. And if you like the review, feel free to leave a thumbs up and share your experience with the Sol-R in the comments, in our Discord or in the daily Twitch live streams. And of course, feel free to use the creator code Karolinger in your order at Thrustmaster. And with that, I say goodbye until next time. Thanks for watching and of course, see you in the verse.